I found it! I found it, guys. Remember that video from a little while ago where I told you where Plato was buried, thanks to the recent decipherment of one of the Herculaneum scrolls, and then I couldn't recite any of the Greek text to you because I couldn't find it. Well, I found it, and it says nothing, because this is just a prop. But I do have access to the transcribed text. Let us go now to the Papyrology Lab. And here we are in the Papyrology Lab, otherwise known as my office. Or, if you recall from the video, Museon, right? Yeah, look at you remembering things from previous videos. Excellent. So, let's get right to it. Aha, here it is. Etafe de kai Platon ento kepo parto Museon. Thanks so much to viewers Riccardo Radici as well as Byzan Simp who wrote to me showing me where to find this text. I'll show you as well in this video. But let's look at this line. We have etafe. He was buried. By the way, I'm using the Pompeian Lucian pronunciation of ancient Greek. This is one of the 6 conventions, the 6 variants of Lucian pronunciation, which is the pronunciation system that I developed along with Raffaele Turrigiano for the pronunciation of ancient Greek during the Koine period. That goes from the death of Alexander all the way until Justinian. And as for the 1st century AD, around Pompeii, that is Herculaneum is right next to it, the Pompeian Lucian pronunciation seems to be the most appropriate. Another good pronunciation convention would be the Romaic Lucian pronunciation. The main difference is that instead of etafe, it's etape, still the aspirates. And instead of musion, that's the Pompeian variant, it's museon. We have the epsilon iota estilated E in front of vowels in Romaic. But I'll keep using the Pompeian variant of Lucian pronunciation today. How many times can you have something authentically written from the region of Pompeii by an actual Greek speaker? Whether or not he used a pronunciation just like this, I don't know. But at least some other people in that area almost certainly did. So, etafe, he was buried, the kai Platon. So, what does de mean? Don't worry about de. If you haven't studied ancient Greek yet, just don't worry about that. It's not that important. It basically means butter, however, and don't worry about it. Platon etafe. So Plato was buried and to kepo in the garden parato museon, by the museum, by the shrine to the muses. See the previous video on this subject to learn more about the meaning of this word, museon. Alkoluteusen ton demon. But he was a person of Koljutos, which is one of the demes. Teteleotekenai diepi Theophilu fesin auton biosante tedio kai ogdoe conta. He finished his life, that is, he died, epi Theophilu, so Theophilos, or Theopulos in the classical Attic pronunciation, he was an archon of Athens from 348 to 347 BC. So that's the idea. He died in that year, or one of those 2 years, biosonta, having lived, ete years duo kai ogdoe conta, 2 and 80. So he was 82 when he died, and he died in 348 or 347 BC. And could we just take a moment to appreciate how amazing it is that we are some of the very first people to lay our eyes on this text. Maybe a few hundred have seen it up to this point, possibly 1,000. I think it's far fewer. A lot of people saw the news articles of the past couple months, but they didn't actually see these very words, and I bet you they weren't using reconstructed pronunciation of the time period of the region that this very text was written in. That's a pretty amazing thing, and we have to remark at the amazing uniqueness of this experience that we're all sharing right now. And a lot of people ask me, well, how can I learn ancient Greek? How can I look at and understand all this stuff on my own? It just looks like this crazy language. And I'm going to tell you what I tell them. If you want some of the best teachers available to teach you the ancient Greek language, then you're going to want to sign up for classes at the Ancient Language Institute. That's right, cue the drums, cue the classy jazz. Ancient Language Institute teaches you to be a fluent reader of ancient Greek, and this is possible because the teachers are guiding you in an immersive environment where you are going to be listening to and even responding in the ancient Greek language from the very first day. Registration for the fall term closes on August 10th, and that's for new cohorts for ancient Greek, for Latin, for Biblical Hebrew, as well as Old English. And keep in mind that the Biblical Hebrew, if you want to start that program, it only starts in the fall semester. And I very, very highly recommend the Old English program. It is absolutely incredible. You saw me and Colin Gorey talk about it here. Learning Old English with ALI is some of the most fun I've had since I started learning Latin. It's outstanding. And all the courses at ALI are so stimulating because you're going to be enjoying this direct, this immersive method where you're going to be able to understand what you're reading. You're going to become a fluent reader. You're going to be speaking a little bit of Latin and Ancient Greek and Hebrew and Old English in your first lessons, and certainly when you get to intermediate and advanced levels. Each class will be filled with immersive discussions on these literary topics in the target language. Wow.
Wow.
Sign up today for the beginner classes that will be held in this fall semester, or you can also sign up for tutorials and more advanced classes as well, intermediate and all sorts of different programs. Check out ancientlanguage.com. All right, so let us go back to where we were. Opiso duo, so this means looking back to, look back to, go back to, opiso, back. So exactly what he's referring to here, I'm not sure if you're supposed to go back to columns or back to scrolls. Not exactly sure what he means. Then we have Neanthes, or Neanthes, the Philiscus Fesin. Well, who is Neanthes? Neanthes was an historian in the 4th and 3rd centuries BC. And interestingly, he was a pupil of Philiscus, and Philiscus was a pupil of Isocrates, Before that, Philiscus was a flute player, and for that reason, apparently, Isocrates called Philiscus Flute-Hole, which is just the most amazing nickname I have ever heard. Flute-Hole was the nickname of Philiscus. It sounds like an Al Pacino one-liner.
Hoo-ha!
Flute-Hole. I tried to find the exact place where Isocrates was supposed to have said it. I couldn't find it in the references. I just saw it mentioned on Wikipedia, this flute-hole. And I did, however, find the word for flute-hole in the dictionary. This would appear to be it, an aulos borer, that is one who puts the holes into the flute, into the aulos. If it weren't actually this, aulotrypes, trypa or trype, meaning a hole, then it probably was aulotrypetikos. Maybe that was the nickname that was given to Philiscus. Only problem is that that's not the Philiscus that's mentioned here. Although Neanthes was the student of Philiscus, that was Philiscus of Meletus. This is Philiscus of Aegina, which is said right here. Neanthes de Philiscus fesin ake koenai tu Aeginetu. So, Philiscus Aeginetu. Okay, so a different Philiscus. Dihoti Platon hypoton prosekonton eklethe dia metopon platu. Neanthes says that he heard from Philiscus of Aegina that he was called Plato, that how he got that nickname, because that wasn't his given name. Plato's given name was Aristocles, because those who knew him, those around him, they said he had a metopon platu, a big, flat, broad forehead. So that's why he's Platon. I've heard other times that he was called Platon because he's broad-shouldered or something, like, it's just handsome, good-looking guy or something. But here it's apparently his forehead. Maybe he had a very broad, good-looking forehead. And then tantalizingly, kai dihoti spartiaton, and also something about the Spartans, something, Aegina. I'm not sure what might follow there. So where can we find this? Well, I will show you. Here, let me go back here. To go to the Greek Schools website. And this website has it all right here. So you go to the third one here, Academico Index, Philodemus. That's right. This is, of course, like we talked about in the previous video, this is Philodemus of Gadara. He is the one who wrote these really interesting things. And you can open up the whole thing or go to the list. Let me zoom out a bit. And we want to go to column number 2, column nummer 2, because, of course, Kilian Fleischer is German, and we're going to see all kinds of evidence of the Germanness. The Scholia, they're all written in Latin, which is really cool. Cognaci, I suggested this. But, of course, his translation is in German, in case you want to see a German translation. If you don't speak German, well, das ist ganz schade. You're just going to have to learn ancient Greek without the need for German. So in the first of the main Greek columns, we see the transcription as loyal as possible to what can actually be seen on the papyrus. And then here is an interpretation, a reasonably conservative interpretation, and there are all kinds of diacritical marks underneath the letters indicating, oh, this letter's not very clear. We see, things that are absent. And these papyrologists, I know papyrologists, papyrology lab, if only. These letters aren't necessarily totally clear, and thus they've been made much more clear, much more legible. Long tracts are much more legible, as we see here. Here's the etape, and that's what I've taken a screenshot of here, so we can see that. But this, again, not super easy to read because it has all these really nice, precise diacritical marks which tell us exactly what loyalty there might be for any individual character. But I've rendered it into a standard-looking written ancient Greek here, so it's that much easier for us to read and to look at today. But here's the more original, if you will, that I'm drawing this from. So you can go to the Greek School's website for yourselves and discover all kinds of things that are just available, stuff that I might gloss over or I might have missed. So if you find anything interesting, by the way, there that I didn't talk about in this video, definitely write a comment about it. It might be a really interesting topic for a future video, or it might just be a really cool thing to share with the channel's community. All right, so next here we're on column number 3 now, and here is the screenshot of that webpage, and here is my transcription of this transcription of the transcription of the transcription. Or the original, whatever. I got a little bit lost there. So there's menon, which he's suggested some word it might refer to. So Plato eprathe was sold Platon adeloson hostis estin. Plato's identity was unknown. I know who he was by the people selling him, andrilian peneti, to just such a poor man, very poor man. Mathonton deton laconon hotisunhea loke. But when the Laconians learned that he had been captured, speodonton labina no themenos skeptetai, and were rushing to seize him, he considered his situation and weighed it. Caetide macedonicon dedios. This is more likely dedios, not dedidos. There's another delta over here, so I transcribed it. But this makes more sense as fearing. Caetide macedonicon dedios ton pros achelaon emenuse proston eonemenon heoton kai so santa. Some sort of karin apotisin hypisknito tu tomen plagenta. And because he feared something Macedonian about this Archelaus, prostoneonemenon, to his buyer he revealed himself, Heauton, and promised him that if he rescued him, he would repay him. And, terrified or something. So, that's interesting. It's so tantalizing because there's so many bits that are missing we have to just imagine. This is further down in the column, lines 38 to 44. Astrologos exegitauto gegonos anagrapheus tu Platonos kai akustes. So an astrologer or an astronomer told him, and this is probably Neanthes, an astrologer or astronomer told Neanthes, we imagine, and this fellow was a registrar, was a secretary of Plato as well as a pupil, hoti, that gegerako se de Platon, when Plato was already quite old, when he had become aged, xenon hubadexoto Chaldaion. He received or entertained a Chaldean guest, metadahe merastinas, epurexen. Oh no, epurexen. He caught ill. After a few days, though, he fell ill with a fever. He got a fever. Oh no, poor Plato. All right, so now we get to the Thracian lady and how it all ended for poor Plato. So there's these thrates engenus ekrotese dactylikon. Someone's tapping some kind of musical rhythm, let us assume at Plato's bedside. He's on his deathbed. He's having to have some music possibly entertain him. So dactylikon rhythmon, dactylic rhythm. Auto dehos paraphronunte. I think this is probably paraphronunta. And the phron has to do with mind, and the para is kind of next to, so out of his mind. So Platona, paraphronunta. Plato was kind of out of his mind. He was pretty delirious. Phoninton Platona kai epirotesai. So he, not sure who it was, asked Plato questions, and poor Plato was not in his right mind. And then he said, I think this is probably puntos. A lot of letters in here, but puntos. Yeah, I'll go with that. Ennuite, hos parin do barbaron amathis. Okay, so, ennuite. You see, you observe, you realize, hos do barbaron amathis, the barbaric ignorance. Potike pararythmon us. So we got ear, para, remember, paraphron, right? Paraphronunta, out of his mind. Pararythmon, out of rhythm, lacking rhythm. He barbaros ferusa, the barbarian lady, this Thracian lady, poor thing, who just wasn't up to this task. Ferusa tutonek peri, this looks like a lack of experience. Adunati mathin, was unable to learn. The Thracian lady, her ear was just totally out of rhythm, was unable to learn, was able to learn from experience, just didn't have what it took to do the music thing. Then we have esthenai megalos. He was very happy, probably referring to the person recounting the story who was at the bedside of the dying Plato. Kain eudia megale tonandra nomizin, and thought that Plato was in eudia. Eudia is good weather normally, but also can be fair condition, and therefore the fair condition. And eudia megale, and in very good condition himself. Tonandra nomizin. And so this is again the same fellow observing this sitting at the bedside. Epi kaitaot epi nun erchetaoto, because he thought the same thing. So Plato complains, boy, this barbarian lady she has no rhythm at all. This is terrible. And I guess he's chuckling, this fellow who's observing this, because he thought the same thing. So he's got to be in a partially good condition, Plato, if he's observing that much. He's not gone yet. It's very sweet. It's very sweet about that. Kai proagi tiethermanthentos de malon ektinos egerseos nuctor akairoteron gegomines. And he continues, this is probably Neanthes. Diathermanthentos, so we have the rising of temperature. Diathermanthentos, yep. Diathermanthentos, the temperature that's warming up, talking about Plato now. Malon, more, heating up more. Ektinos, egerseos. Egersis would have to be the waking up. So egerseos, from some waking up, nuctor, at night, akairoteron, rather untimely, in a rather untimely fashion, genomenes, which is referring to the waking up. So, but his temperature heating, because he had a fever, right? This one we saw before, epurexen. The pyr there is fire, catching, fire of the fever. So that's where the word for catching a fever comes from pyr, from fire. And that is what I talked about in that previous video. Those are the quotes that now we have gotten to experience together. It's rather fragmentary, and it's so tantalizing because there's so many more details that are in those papyri. Maybe they're lost forever. Maybe further advances in technology and further scholarship will permit us to learn these amazing secrets. But isn't that great? We're some of the first people ever to explore those words and situations directly as we can. So much of what we enjoy as people who like history or the classics or these ancient languages, we can open up a physical edition we have of, Cicero's letters, Caesar's Gallic Wars, or the orations of Demosthenes, or Plato's works themselves, right? But they have been transcribed directly. We have almost no original papyri from antiquity. It's because of the incredibly hard work of the transcriptions, like those monks I mentioned, the scriptorium in the previous video about shadowing. That's where we get everything, and thank goodness, it's fantastic we have all those great standardized editions. But how rare to actually look at ancient papyri, or at least in this case the transcribed version, something yet more authentic, and the poor papyrus was brutalized by that volcano, but also preserved by it, and all those famous, important classical works of Plato and Demosthenes, of Virgil and Homer, of course, but they've been read by millions and millions of people in either original or in translated form for thousands of years. And they're rightly very important, but we today got to look at some of the original text and read stuff that very, very few people have read. Very few people in history have read. The people who were reading Philodemus back in the 1st century AD, and I don't even know his work survived the 1st century. These in particular, rediscovered now, being read for the first time, these words in the past few months. What a worthwhile thing to be able to learn these ancient languages. Have that opportunity. How many people can say they've done something like that? And we have. I think that's Really cool. The text, little PowerPoint that you saw here, I'm going to put it on Patreon for my Patreon supporters if you want to take a look at it. So you can take the text and copy and paste if you want to use it for anything. I don't know if that's useful. I just wanted to put it somewhere because I took a lot of time to transcribe those sections. But there's a lot more on that website. Maybe you'll find something else really interesting, really worth talking about. Thank you again to the Ancient Language Institute for supporting this video and the channel. Definitely check out ancientlanguage.com so you too can learn ancient Greek. And thanks as always to each and every one of my Patreon supporters. Hugiainete kai walete.
Hoo-ha!
Flute-Hole.
Hoo-ha!
Flute-Hole.
Hoo-ha!
Flute-Hole.
Hoo-ha!
Flute-Hole.
Talk about overusing a catchphrase.
Flute-Hole.
Hachi-machi.
It stinks.